Hello everyone, this is part 23 of What If Naruto Had a Proper Teacher, and I hope you guys enjoy this video and to like, to subscribe, and check out the playlist, to see more comment down below. Now let's start the intro.
They call me a god. They call me a god. They call me a god.
Team 7 moved out for Kumo. They were clad head to toe in the black Fuinjutsu suits Sakura had supplied. Kakashi already had some specific modifications he would like for his suit that he would talk to Sakura about when they returned. The countryside of Hai no Kuni blurred past them. They would be crossing a couple of countries before they reached Kumo, but it wouldn't take them long moving at the speed they were going. The plan was simple: reach the borders of the Land of Lightning and destroy any defensive bastions and shinobi patrols they encountered. After shattering their outer defenses, they would retreat back toward Konoha. Kumo wouldn't know for sure if this was a prelude to a larger invasion or just an attack of opportunity. They would waste time and manpower, and before they could get their act together, Team 7 would be back in Konoha. It was only the first phase in a multi-step plan that Shikaku and Kakashi had hashed out. Sasuke was eager to try his new Sharingan abilities out. So far his eyes had not weakened like Kakashi's eye had with repeated use. Likely Susanoo would be overkill for whatever they faced, but even weak opponents could still allow him to test the chakra construct and his other new abilities. Sakura was less eager. While this was war and not murder, she knew that this was basically an execution. The defending Kumo shinobi didn't stand a chance. Field experimentation was well and good, but if the caliber of their opponents wasn't challenging enough, it would mean little. Besides, she would much rather be working on refining some of her ideas for her next project. Naruto's mind wasn't in the game. Oh, he kept his senses sharp and ensured he wouldn't be caught off guard in an ambush, but his thoughts were not on the mission. Instead, they were focused on Neji, Lee and Tenten. Sending out shinobi on a mission was nerve-wracking to him, and his thoughts constantly flitted back to their safety. Kakashi approached the mission the same way he did all missions. It was another job and he would do it the best of his ability. The four had very different thoughts going through their heads, but when the time came for jutsu and kunai, they would act as one. Break. Dai Munashi had not been happy since the council meeting where the Mizukage had declared their village would be neutral in the coming conflict. He knew he was one of the best kenjutsu specialists in the village, but outside of Kiri no one knew his strength. The thought of being an old man before being acknowledged by the wider world was simply unacceptable. In a clearing on his family property, he worked out his frustrations by doing a set of blistering fast blade strikes. He lost himself in the steady rhythm of his blade work. Outside of true battle, this was what he reveled in. The blade he used was a simple katana. What he did with it was where the magic happened. Kisame let some of his chakra loose that he had been tightly coiling as he watched the young Munashi go through his blade routines. Dai's eyes instantly went to him as he walked out of the mist. Not bad at all, Kisame complimented. Dai had the confidence and brashness of youth, but even with it he knew he was outmatched. This was the Mist's greatest swordsman and one of its greatest traitors. What do you want? His voice was tight and harsh. Kisame revealed his sharp teeth. It's obvious you're not pleased with Little Mei's refusal to join the war. What if I gave you a way to fight? To test your mettle against my enemies? The ice had been broken and soon Dai had agreed. Kisame was a bit disappointed that Sasori's intel was again accurate. Just once he'd like to see the creepy puppet master be wrong about these things. Ah well, it will be good to have another swordsman with us. Break. It was good to be back with her old teammates. Tenten had missed the two of them, even though they had driven her crazy when she was a genin. Age had mellowed out some of their more annoying traits. Neji was not longer so fatalistic about, well, everything. Guy had taught him a final lesson with his death, and now the young man had abandoned his talk of fate. In fact, lately Neji was smiling far more often. Tenten wasn't quite sure what to make of it. Maybe he was happy that Hinata was now in charge of the clan. Rock Lee had also changed. The death of his sensei had been a colossal blow and he had been depressed for over a month. He finally found a way to deal with his grief and respect what Guy had taught him. While he was still prone to challenging himself to difficult tasks, he didn't do it nearly as often. And he was a bit easier on the ears too. What do you expect we'll find when we get there? Tenten asked her two companions. Neji, Who had the most knowledge of the land of iron? Shrugged. The samurai tend to keep to themselves. They are very traditional and generally look down on shinobi. If that's the case, why is the Hokage worried they might side with Kumo? Mifune is different. He has fought with shinobi in the past and has even visited the elemental nations on numerous occasions. Unlike his predecessors, he keeps watch on the shinobi world. The samurai cherish their way of the sword and Kumo-nin are respectful of this. Several Kumo shinobi have actually apprenticed themselves to the samurai for a while. Lee pumped his fist into the air. If it were easy, the Hokage would not have brought our team back together. We must show them that we have honor as well and that Kumogakur is the one who started this conflict. Tenten questioned Neji about what else he knew about the potential players in Tetsu no Kuni, Land of Iron. Mifune's right-hand man and the samurai in charge of security is Okisuke. He doesn't like shinobi at all, which is good since we know he'll recommend not aiding Kumo. Neji continued, the one in charge of trade with the elemental nations is Yurikaku. He's hard to read, but the Hyuga have a cordial relationship with the man. That is who we will meet with first to see if we can get an audience with Mifune himself. With the plan in place, they continued their journey. They were on guard, with Kumo-nin also being in the area. They needed to be prepared for anything. Break. Konohamaru had received the promotion to Chunin. With his sensei Ebisu still going through extensive physical rehabilitation after his encounter with the Chushikage, it made sense to keep the team intact and simply add another. It would allow Konohamaru to gain experience leading teams, though all of the missions would be within Hai no Kuni. Hanabi Hyuga was the fourth member of the team. She was younger than Udon, Mogi and Konohamaru, but she had been trained by her house from a very young age. Konohamaru had been embarrassed after he actually lost a taijutsu spar with her. He was confident he could beat the young Hyuga in a full-out fight, but when it came to taijutsu she had his number. It was quite annoying considering Hanabi had graduated the academy early and was 2 years younger than he was. For her part, Hanabi was glad to finally be a shinobi. Beating her new team commander gave her a boost in pride, but Hinata's orders to have Ko act as her escort even after becoming a genin had knocked the wind out of her sails. Ko did not mind watching over Hanabi, just as he had not minded watching over Hinata. It was an honor and one that showed Hinata-sama trusted him implicitly. Having the seal removed had made him more, not less, loyal to the main branch line. Ko's thoughts were interrupted when he saw 4 of the clan elders arrive at the training grounds. He immediately approached them as Konohamaru called a halt to their training. We have come to take Hanabi to her sister. Your presence is no longer required, Ko. The elder spoke in a low, confident tone. He expected obedience. Ko bowed his head. Forgive me, but I have received orders from Hinata-sama herself to be by Lady Hanabi's side at all times. The female elder frowned. Remember your place. You have your orders, but surely they do not entail refusing a command from one of us. Ko remained steadfast. Honored elder, I mean no disrespect, but I do not interpret Hinata-sama's orders, I follow them to the letter. If you find me at fault, please report it to Hinata-sama. The lead speaker stepped forward and loomed a bit. Ko Hyuga, I am an elder of the family and I order you to relinquish Hanabi into our care. Do not try my patience. Konohamaru was well aware of the caged bird seal and the effects it could have on the branch family. He did not want to see the torture seal used. He stepped forward between them. Regardless of Lady Hyuga's orders, I am the commander of this genin cell and I say that training is not done. The elders glanced at each other nervously. Dealing with the Sarutobi clan wasn't what they had bargained for. Konohamaru, this is a private affair of the Hyuga clan. I am sure training can wait for another day. Konohamaru folded his arms across his chest and simply replied, no. The elders were at a crossroads. One of the ones who had not yet spoken retorted angrily. Regardless of what you say, boy, you will not interfere in a private clan matter. After saying these words, he formed the seal that would leave Ko in agony on the ground. Only much to everyone but Ko's surprise, nothing happened. The lead elder stared at Ko as if he had grown horns and transformed into a biju. He attempted to activate the seal again. There was no effect. What have you done? The female elder dashed forward and chakra crackled at her fingertips as she leaped at the branch member. At the same time she shouted at the rest, take them, none can know of this. Ko was no Neji, however he was probably the second strongest branch member in the Hyuga clan and he was in his prime. He deflected the older Kunoichi's attacks and shouted, Hanabi, run. He didn't know why the 4 clan elders wanted Hanabi, but it couldn't have been for anything good. Hinata would never have sent them like this for her sister. Hanabi had been given an order but was torn on what to do. Udon and Mogi tossed a barrage of kunai at one of the elders. While their accuracy was on point, for a Hyuga it was easy to deflect projectiles, and they did little but slow down the advance of the other main house elders. But even that short period of time was vital, as Konohamaru swiftly bit his thumb and gave a tremendous shout. Kuchio's no Jutsu. Summoning technique. Break. Likyu was something of a taijutsu prodigy in Kumo. While only 13 years old, she had already reached the rank of Chunin. Considering the inherent weakness taijutsu uses faced against kenjutsu, this meant her taijutsu was actually at the level of a jonin. Her short-cropped light blue hair was kept short so it wouldn't interfere with her complicated acrobatic attacks. She, like the other members of the 5 different teams manning the outpost on this section of the border of their country, was tense. If the enemy marched here, they were the first line of defense. Many thought it was only a matter of time. It comforted her that her older sister Niu was also stationed here. How she hated Konoha and the cruel schemes. She had seen the jovial Killer Bee perform one of his rap sessions in front of the crowds. She had remembered thinking him a blundering fool who was utterly harmless. And she had watched as the Jinchuriki fought the strange Konoha team that had waltzed into their village. She had never imagined that the man she had considered a fool would fight with such ferocity. But in the end, no matter how many times the Konoha shinobi seemingly were defeated, they would emerge whole out of a giant mouth. In the end, they had captured the Raikage's brother while the village watched helplessly. Since then 2 months had passed as she brutally trained her body. She vowed to herself that she would never be so helpless in front of an enemy again. The afternoon brought a small cool breeze. All was clear on her end when a massive surge of chakra filled the air. It was immense. And it was coming from above. She felt an ominous foreboding as the chakra grew heavier and the breeze stopped. The Jonin commander of the outpost shouted, "Get away from the outpost. Now." Likyu didn't have to be told twice as she jumped over the wooden railing and raced down the side of the construct. She saw others from her team do the same. She got to the ground and continued racing away from the structure when the entire fortification was smashed to pieces. A heavy force with the strength of a meteor had slammed into the fortress. It was obliterated and wooden shrapnel was blasted in all directions. Likyu was thrown off her feet and she flipped backwards, bringing her arms up to protect her vital areas. Wooden shrapnel streamed past her at speeds faster than any thrown kunai. She rolled into the ground and broke her fall adroitly. The kunoiki looked frantically for her sister and exhaled in relief when she saw she was fine, if a bit bloody from the fall. The Jonin commander was alive as well, though he had a vicious gash in his leg. Through the haze she could see another couple of survivors, but that was it. 15 shinobi dead in an instant. She swallowed and saw the enemy. 4 Konoha nin in dark Anbu uniforms. Their faceless masks, she knew, hid faces that were probably filled with sadistic glee at the lives they had just snuffed out. Rage gripped her as her fists clenched. She advanced forward, ready and eager to avenge her comrades. The foe that broke off to fight her was slightly taller than her. Tufts of pink hair peeked out above the white mask that concealed her features. To Likyu's right she saw her commander ready his wakizashi. However, he had not gone forward 3 steps when black fire sprang around him. It burned him horribly and he let out an involuntary scream of pain. She saw her sister quickly attempt to douse the flames with her Suten jutsu. But the effort was futile as the water proved impotent against the black flames. The screams filled her mind as she closed on the enemy kunoiki. She put on a burst of speed and dived low, coming up with a surprise rising kick. Her opponent blocked the blow and pushed her leg away, but she was already compensating and delivered several quick strikes. Each blow was blocked skillfully. She heard her sister give out a cry of pain along with the splash of wind and water. She redoubled her efforts to take down her enemy. The enemy blocked a punch, but it left her wide open. Grinning, Likyu slammed her elbow into the hateful mask. It did no damage to her enemy and hurt her own elbow. Her opponent's head was knocked back from the blow slightly, but the mask didn't even have a dent on it. Fine. If that doesn't work, I'll strike somewhere else. Earlier her opponent had been able to block her attacks, but now she was allowing openings. Likyu was worried about a trap, but with her commander burning to death and her sister in trouble, it was no time to be cautious. Her fist slammed into the belly of her opponent only for her knuckles to be bruised. It was like punching steel. The blow caused her opponent to be pushed back a step, but other than that it hadn't even fazed her. Snarling in rage, she unleashed another taijutsu barrage. Now even more of her blows were getting through. A punch to the shoulder, a knife hand to the ribs, a kick to the leg and another kick to the chest. All succeeded in accomplishing absolutely nothing. Her hands were hurting and she had been unable to deal a single decent blow. The battlefield became silent. The screams had stopped. She looked frantically around and spotted not a living comrade in sight. Her sister's body lay on the ground in a pool of blood. Sorrow warred with rage. Her entire team, her commander and her sister were all dead. And she couldn't do a single thing to stop them. All of her training was useless. Just like when they took Killer Bee, she was utterly helpless. A shinobi wasn't supposed to show emotion, but tears now glistened on her cheeks. A voice spoke, "The only one who might have had any actionable intelligence is now a burnt corpse. This one won't know anything of use." There was no doubt what was going to happen next, but she would not die on her knees. The 13-year-old girl let out one last battle cry and charged forward. Her fist arched forward with all of the power she could muster. The pink-haired shinobi darted to the side and countered with a palm strike. Likyu brought her other arm up to block, and pain was the price. From her enemy's palm, scores of razor-sharp metal shards sped forward and ripped her arm apart. Several of the shards ripped into her shoulder, chest and embedded themselves in her lungs. The impact and momentum of the shards drove her to the ground as she coughed up blood. She knew it was a mortal blow. She weakly tried to inhale only to aspirate her life's blood. Her last thoughts were ones of hatred and grief for the monsters of the leaf before a kunai mercifully ended her suffering. Break. Fuyu was frustrated with her task. She was responsible for bringing in 19 other Jonin together and forging them into a team that could kill opponents like the Sannin and Kakashi. As she looked over every dossier, she grew more and more frustrated. Every single S-ranked shinobi from Kumo was dead. The idea of any of these shinobi being able to stand up to someone of Jiraiya's caliber was laughable. So far she had only picked 3 of her best scouts and 1 medical nin skilled with chakra scalpels. That was it. She had spent 2 months attempting to figure out who should be in her elite assassination squad, and indecision was crippling her. She had over 50 names in the maybe pile and twice that in the definite no pile, but she was no closer to rounding out the remaining 15 than she was 2 weeks ago. And now Tezuka Yotsuki, the new Reikage, had demanded an update on the status of the Kinkaku force. She bowed low. "Reikage-sama, forgive me, but I have made little progress." The older shinobi stared at her intently, his features were expressionless. "Konoha could strike at any moment and we need something to counter their monstrous shinobi. We cannot afford delay." "Hi, I understand, but when I look over everyone's abilities I cannot see how we can win with any sort of consistency. If we just fought Tsunade or the Hokage by themselves 20-1 we could win, but when will they be alone? I fear any name that I select will be another shinobi doomed to die." Tezuka did not respond right away. Instead he let the silence stretch between them. It was very different than how the previous Reikage behaved. He was all action and you always knew where you stood with him. Yotsuki was the opposite. She didn't know if he enjoyed watching his subordinates squirm or if that was just a vicious rumor, but she hoped he would speak soon and break the repressive silence. And if they are doomed to die, why not have them go out in a blaze of glory? "I will grant you full access to all of the kinjutsu known to us. Many of the techniques are kinjutsu because they involve great sacrifice of body or sometimes even one's life to use." Fuyu didn't like the sound of that. But there was logic there. Hadn't the Reikage died at the hands of a kinjutsu? It cost his killer his life, but he was dead and the invasion halted all the same. It was unlikely they would have something like the Hachiman in the sealed archives, but there may be other techniques that were banned that could do something similar. And all it would take was the probable cost of one shinobi's life. As members of Kumogaku, she and anyone else would be proud to die for their village while taking out such a tremendous threat. "Thank you Reikage-sama for your wisdom. I will have my team review the kinjutsu and then make my selections within the week." Without saying another word, the Godime waved his hand and dismissed her. Fuyu left and headed down the sealed area where the kinjutsu were kept. She felt hope for the first time in a month. Somewhere in those dark and dusty archives lay something she could give her team, something that could equalize the battlefield. If it required the sacrifice of her life, she would give it, but she would look for any way to avoid that. She had a promise to fulfill and a brother to avenge before she would allow herself to die. Break. An explosion of smoke revealed the mighty form of Enma the Monkey King. The Hyuga elders stopped. They had not expected the personal summon of the Sandaime to appear before them. Enma took in the scene and snorted. What is going on here? Konohamaru looked angry. These idiots tried to attack me and they attacked Hanabi's bodyguard. The lead elder was quickly grasping at straws on how to proceed. Attacking the Monkey King was tantamount to suicide. This summon was able to make a difference in cage-level battles. Even if they had been in their prime, it was doubtful they could win the encounter now. Enma-sama, we are here at the behest of Lady Hinata to retrieve her sister. We were stopped by this branch member and young Konohamaru was confused and thought we were in the wrong. Please take young Sarutobi in hand and we will take Hanabi and Co. with us back to the Hyuga estates. The old monkey looked at the elders with disdain. He was not impressed with the lies he was hearing. Barely restrained killing intent still radiated from the four elders. Enma spoke in a deep voice, we go to the Hokage Tower and this will be sorted out there. The elders protested, but when Enma insisted, they faced the choice of outright battle or obedience. The chief summons of the various animal clans did not care about Hyuga prestige. The four were feverishly thinking of how they could get out of the situation. Their plan was in shambles and they would soon be at the mercy of an angry Hokage. Not only was their plan ruined, but the clan as they knew it was being swept away. Hinata had always spoken out against the caged bird seal and now she had somehow freed one of the branch members. Unsealed branch members would be under no obligation to listen to the main branch. They marched to the Hokage Tower with growing trepidation. The Hyuga clan as they knew it had been stolen from them and their scheming would take them out of the game. In their minds, Hinata and her soft-hearted ways would kill the clan and their ability to take any sort of action was now marginalized. Break. Mabui had arrived in the Land of Iron with her bodyguards. She had been instrumental in organizing a clean succession and allowing the Godime Raikage to assume control. However, Tezuka preferred his own assistant after the initial handoff had occurred. This was fine for Mabui since the man's cold demeanor was a constant reminder that the Yondaime Raikage was dead and gone. However, Mabui's knowledge of international politics would not go to waste. Tezuka's clan had paved the way for a private audience with Mifune himself to plead Kumo's case. Her arguments were lined up and in 2 days' time she would do her best to win the support of the samurai. As a jonin herself, she knew that Kumo could not win as they were now. Either Kirigaka or the Land of Iron would need to provide assistance or Konoha would destroy them. A complication had arisen, however. A team from Konoha had just arrived as well. With an opposing viewpoint, it would be much harder to make their case. Her bodyguard proposed one solution that Mabui had concerns with. Archoi had recommended they kill the trio of Konoha nin that had arrived before they could say their piece. The problem was that there was no guarantee they would be victorious and it would cast their claims of Konoha aggression in doubt. Archoi had been angry at her denial and he had stormed off. She had him followed just in case he decided to do something rash. He was a terrible choice to accompany her, but it had been the Raikage's orders. For the life of her, she couldn't begin to grasp the reasoning of sending someone who had been reprimanded for speaking out of turn on a diplomatic mission. The Raikage's nephew Hidaka Yotsuki glanced at her worriedly. You don't think he would actually try to confront the Konoha shinobi himself, do you? The Raikage's nephew was a short and slender man. He was a genjutsu specialist like his uncle. As she understood it, she had been saddled with him to show him how international diplomacy worked. Mabui found this curious because the boy was 17 and still a chunin. Which was actually average, but why groom someone for leadership positions when they were mediocre? The young man's generally nervous nature also bothered her. I don't think he will, but it doesn't hurt to be cautious. The loss of his arm and the death of his sister have made him bitter. Hidaka tapped his fingers nervously on the table. What are you going to do about the Konoha shinobi? Right now, nothing. I will go forward and make my case to Mifune. I'll let him know how two-faced the Leaf Village has been and about the abduction of the Jinchuriki. I wish they weren't here, but any move we make on them has the chance of backfiring terribly. Do you think they might come after us? Mabui shook her head. We should be cautious but not paranoid. We have a dozen shinobi here and they only have 3. We don't know enough about their team to determine how dangerous they are, but attacking us creates the same risk for Konoha as attacking them would for us. That being said, Mabui returned to her thoughts on how to best present the Raikage's case to the Taisho of Tetsu no Kuni. Anko finished heaving the contents of her stomach. Fuck morning sickness, she said out loud even though one was around to hear her. She washed her mouth out and swore vengeance on Iruka for what he had done to her. Break. Team 7 hit several more of Kumo's border fortifications. Some of them were manned by soldiers of the daimyo while others had shinobi garrisoned. Regardless of who was defending them, the results mattered little. Sakura was able to battle test her new seals and all 4 of them were getting comfortable with triggering the Fuinjutsu seals in taijutsu encounters. Sasuke became proficient with Amaterasu and Susanoo. Susanoo was a significant chakra drain, but it acted as a nearly impenetrable defense and at the same time gave him a multiple of offensive options. He could use a sword or actually fire arrows of pure chakra at his opponents. Needless to say, between the brutal efficacy of Kakashi, the Fuinjutsu and Genjutsu of Sakura, the massive army of clones and powerful Futon Jutsu and the heightened abilities of Mangekyo Sharingan, there was nothing the valiant border forces could do to stop them. This led to Sasuke growing impatient for a real fight. Kakashi-sensei, why don't we just end this war? Head to Kumogakure and destroy the village once and for all. Kakashi gave his eager pupil an eye smile. Chakra is finite even for Naruto. Dealing with thousands and thousands of shinobi will exhaust our chakra reserves and eventually we would be overrun. I also have a feeling that Kumo will have a few tricks still up their sleeves. I don't think they will be any challenge. I see your point about chakra, but this is pathetic. We've been out here for 2 days and the last fortification we arrived at had been abandoned. Naruto added his perspective. Don't forget, we don't want to get too winded in case we have to deal with more Akatsuki. I've reviewed the reports. Those bastards hit Iwagakure and Kumogakure and got their Jinchuriki while we were defending Konoha. And that was with Kisame and Itachi, 2 of what we assumed were their strongest, interfering with our battle outside of Takagakure. They still have some heavy hitters and we don't want to let our guard down. Fine, I see the point. I guess there is nothing left to do but head back. Kakashi agreed. Naruto whispered something to Sakura which made her snort with amusement. Sasuke narrowed his eyes at the pair, which caused Sakura to laugh again. What? Nothing, just commenting that someone was probably looking for a reason to delay returning to Konoha, Naruto answered. Shut up. Sasuke growled. He knew they were poking fun at his less than cordial start to his first marriage. Kakashi smiled beneath his mask. While they didn't have the professional decorum he was used to in Anbu, he didn't mind cutting him some slack. They had exceeded even his high expectations. What Sasuke had said wasn't far off the mark. His Susanoo was something that very few shinobi had any answer to. And even with that strength, Kakashi knew Naruto was even stronger. The boy's chakra reserves allowed him to abuse Kage Bunshin like no other shinobi. The pure speed and strength that was replicated with the shadow clones would allow a single clone to deal with any Chunin one-on-one. And if a single clone fought a Jonin, it might very well win as well, depending on the Jonin's specialty. Sakura didn't have the village-killing abilities of her 2 teammates, but her Fuinjutsu allowed her to be a force multiplier. Even more than just enhancing her own team's abilities, her seals were making every single Konoha shinobi more powerful once they became more widely distributed. Wherever Team 7 went, they would crush their enemy, but they couldn't be everywhere at once. Sakura's seals could be. Kakashi would never allow overconfidence to jeopardize his village. However, looking at the conflict from a logical perspective, they had this in the bag if the Akatsuki didn't step in and assist. The possibilities of the Rinnegan were disturbing, and it was one of the final worries Kakashi had for the future of his young prodigies. Kakashi signaled the team and they raced back toward Konoha. Another successful mission was complete. Break. Archoi wasn't happy about the mission to the Land of Iron. It seemed obvious to him that this was a punishment for speaking out of turn. The new Raikage remembered even small slights, and so he was sent into a non-combat mission when all he really wanted to do was burn some Konoha shinobi. He had taken the opportunity to leave the others and enjoy the night air. To many it would seem cold, but Archoi was never touched by it. That thought reminded him of his sister and his mood soured again. The change in emotions was fortunate as he realized the telltale signs of a genjutsu creeping into his chakra network. Reacted with the speed and grace elite Jonin were known for, he used Kawarimi to alter his position with a stone and then hastily flushed his chakra system with a forceful Kai. His reaction time had been fortunate as dozens of kunai smashed the stone and the area around it a moment later. Archoi let his senses drift out and he felt a trio of chakra signatures. He spotted two of them. One was throwing the spent kunai scroll to the side and pulling out a second. The other figure was Kunoiki, who threw a brace of kunai with explosive tags trailing the end of them. Konoha dogs. Archoi used one hand to form the necessary seals and launched Kaiten, Goryuka no Jutsu, fire release, Great Dragon fire technique. The massive dragon made of flame intercepted the two kunai and prematurely detonated the exploding tags. The dragon's fury was not yet spent as it raced toward the two shinobi. Both shinobi leaped away from the attack and the dragon detonated. The destructive attack collapsed a nearby building and seared one of the attacking shinobi. Archoi was on guard now, and so when he felt the intrusion of another genjutsu, he swiftly negated the mentally unbalancing attack. He spotted a third figure that was likely responsible for the genjutsu draw a blade and make a beeline for him. The Kumo shinobi was tempted to test his katana skills with his left arm but decided against it. Instead he launched one of his signature techniques. Kaiten, Shibo Hari, fire release, death needles. A tiny ball of fire raced toward the charging shinobi. Once it was only several feet away, it detonated into tiny slivers of fire in all directions. The heat from the tiny bits of flame seared through the cobblestone and the walls of nearby buildings. The shinobi was perforated with dozens of the fiery needles, however, instead of dying, the charging shinobi dissipated in a puff of smoke. Fucking shadow clones, Archoi snarled. The singed shinobi turned and launched Kaiten, Gokakyu no Jutsu, fire release, great fireball technique, at him. Archoi was insulted that the Konoha dog would attempt to use a fire jutsu on him. Using barely a trickle of his own chakra, he pushed the flames away from him. The technique didn't have a name, but what it essentially did was mix his own Kaiten chakra with the oncoming attack. He then had brief and tentative control of the flames, which he used to shove the attack away from him. All of this had occurred in less than 10 seconds and the alarm bells began to ring. The samurai would soon be on the way. A swarm of kunai rushed his way from the second scroll and he dodged to the side, preparing another Kaiten jutsu. Before he could accomplish that, another of the leaf nin sprang at him and led with a kick. Archoi blocked with own leg and counter-attacked with a knife hand strike. The enemy shinobi blocked the attack, but the force of the blow was enough to dispel the cage bunshin. He was about to return to his own jutsu when he noticed the two shinobi he initially saw were fleeing across the rooftops. He began to pursue, taking to the roofs himself. A patrol of samurai shouted, "Halt in the name of the Taisho." Archoi longed to pursue the fleeing shinobi, but he wasn't quite hot-headed enough to ignore the direct commands of the samurai. If he did, the diplomatic mission would end in shame. Fine, but don't lose sight of them. There is another one around here somewhere too. Archoi didn't hold out much hope the samurai would be able to catch them. Samurai weren't useless in a fight, but their strength lay in kenjutsu, not in stealth and subterfuge. Archoi was not wrong and would later learn all of the shinobi had escaped. Break. Neji, Lee and Tenten woke early and prepared for their meeting with Yurikaku. Neji hoped Lee would remain restrained. They both have large eyebrows, maybe they can bond over that, Neji thought sarcastically. Neji had worn formal Hyuga robes. Tenten was not wearing her normal kunoiki gear. Instead, she had opted to wear a kimono with a floral pattern that was in style within Tetsu no Kuni. And Lee, well, he had been unable to convince Lee to go shopping for another outfit. And apparently green spandex was all the taijutsu expert owned. The first concern Neji noticed when they arrived was the massive amount of security. There were far more samurai around every nook and corner than would be normal. He knew the Kumo delegation had arrived first. They may have poisoned the well, so to speak, and could have told stories about the team's true purpose here. They were soon ushered into a room with Yurikaku. The man was seated behind a desk and had a dozen samurai in the room lining the walls. Neji stepped forward and one of the armored men stepped in his path. "You go no further, shinobi." His brow furrowed and he looked at Yurikaku and inclined his head. "I had expected a warmer greeting from my clan's friends in Tetsu no Kuni." Yurikaku stood up slowly and gestured with his hand dismissively. "I have long been a friend to the Hyuga and a personal one to your father." He paused and then continued. "First and foremost, I am a servant of Mifune-sama as you are a servant to Jiraiya. We serve Tetsu no Kuni and you serve Hai no Kuni. Our friendship cannot change those facts." Tenten looked at Neji worriedly. The Hyuga briefly considered how direct he should be. Ultimately he determined the best course would be to find out the why behind the hostility. Yurikaku-sama, your loyalty to your country is admirable and I would never expect that to change. I am curious why you think our respective loyalties would prevent our clan's continued friendship. The man's gaze narrowed. Do not play us for fools. You are at war with Kumo and have attempted to assassinate one of the diplomats on our soil. Starting a conflict with someone the Taisho had granted safe passage is an attack on our honor. Neji's eyes widened slightly. I assure you Konoha did not attack anyone within your land. Why would we risk conflict with you? Our purpose is to reaffirm your neutrality in the coming conflict. Yurikaku made a gesture and one of his guards approached and handed Neji an empty kunai scroll. This was found at the scene of the ambush. Tenten interjected, there are thousands of those scrolls across Hai no Kuni. Anyone could have taken one and resealed the kunai after any of the battles Kumo won when they invaded. You are denying all knowledge of the attack and proclaiming your village's innocence. Neji nodded gravely. Hi, this is a plot to bring you into the conflict. I would not stain the honor of my clan by greeting you while sending assassins. One of the doors slid open and a bald-headed samurai walked in. Based on his appearance Neji knew him to be Okisuke, the head of security for the Taisho. Shinobi have no honor, the newcomer announced. Lee interrupted with a shout, you are wrong. Yes, shinobi use subterfuge but many abide by principles. I would never stab an ally in the back and I will always hold true to the wall of fire. The sudden movement from Lee, who had gestured wildly, led to several of the samurai to draw their blades and move forward to defend Okisuke. Lee put his hands up and backed up a step. Okisuke scowled, you are under arrest and will be judged by the general himself. There you can plead your case and you will receive his justice. Neji was at a crossroads. If he allowed the arrest to take place they would be slapped with chakra inhibitor seals and would truly be at Mifune's mercy. All three of them were incredibly skilled and fighting their way out wasn't impossible, but it would be difficult. It would also demolish any chance of working out a non-aggression agreement with the Land of Iron. With a sigh he signaled Tenten and Lee to allow the arrest to happen. Neji hoped that they would get a fair hearing. By reputation Mifune would at least listen to them before deciding their fate. Hopefully the false evidence that was being laid against them wouldn't be insurmountable. Break. Deidara was to carry out the next part of the Akatsuki plan. Others were continuing the process of recruiting a ranked shinobi from around the elemental nations. It was his job to stir the pot a bit. He flew thousands of feet in the air as he looked down at the specks and buildings from above. He was like a kami up here. No kunai could reach him from where he stood upon his flying clay construct. But his bombs could certainly reach his victims. This particular mission was beneath him but it was still an excuse to blow things up. The small village within Kase no Kuni would soon learn that art was an explosion. He let the clay come out of his palms as he shaped it. For this mission nothing larger than C1 was needed but why not have some fun? Kibaku Nendo, explosive clay, was so delightfully versatile. Manipulating his chakra he crafted a massive dragon that soared down at the village. The dragon spat out smaller clay constructs that raced ahead and detonated on the defenseless village. The citizens of Wind Country died in droves as they fled the bombs. Deidara's initial detonations had occurred in a circular pattern around the village which prompted the people to rush toward the center. This meant they were honored to see the massive explosion that his C2 caused as it crashed into the center. He hoped they would appreciate his artistic talents in the fraction of a second they had before becoming incinerated. The village hadn't even had any shinobi in it and he wondered why it had been targeted. He shrugged. He followed orders and got the chance to grace the world with his art. That was all he needed. Break. Mabui was thrilled with the recent turn of events. The Konoha shinobi had been stupid enough to assault Archoi in the middle of the town. Now they were under arrest and Mifune was going to sit in judgment over their actions. Before that took place she would have her formal audience with him and Archoi would explain exactly what happened. Soon she found herself in a room with Mifune and his advisors. Mifune's voice wasn't harsh but it echoed with authority. Mabui-san, I welcome you to our land and I formally apologize for the near harm to your comrade. Security has been increased while you are here. Mabui bowed. You are too kind Mifune Dono. We regret that we have brought our conflict to your doorstep but the fate of the elemental nations hangs in the balance. I will not deceive you Taisho, Kumogakur is losing the war. The man didn't change his expression at all and Mabui continued. Our Reikage was slain along with the best of our shinobi. We still outnumber Konohagakure, but we have little that can stop their most powerful figures without horrendous casualties. You can balance the playing field and allow us the hope of success. Should Kumo and our ally Iwa fall, it is only a matter of time until they conquer all of the elemental nations and come for you. Their Hokage has captured many of the Biju, and as soon as their fresh crop of Jinchuriki can be trained, they will be unstoppable. The old general responded, "It was my understanding that it was Kumo and Iwa who were the aggressors. You attacked Hai no Kuni and invaded Konoha itself." "Hi, this is true, but it was only in response to the abduction of our Jinchuriki. That was not the only incident that occurred either." Mabui took a stack of papers from one of her folders and handed it to a samurai who presented it to Mifune. "This is a list of other attacks that occurred. You'll see on page 3 is the late Daru's report. The enemies within our borders used advanced fuinjutsu techniques and matched the descriptions of nin that Konoha had reported missing." Mifune scanned through the papers, reading them quickly. The Kumo diplomat remained silent while he read. When he looked up, she continued. "We were manipulated into the war, and then both ourselves and Iwa were attacked and lost the other Jinchuriki. Here is my analysis that shows the similarity between the plot that sparked this war and what Sharingan no Kakashi did during the Chunin exams by revealing the Namikas. They lured Iwa into a trap, and we failed to heed that lesson and rushed blindly into war, which allowed their forces to capture more of the tailed beasts. Jiraiya is shrewd and growing ever more powerful." Archoi was impressed by the Kunoichi's eloquence and logical review of Konoha's actions. He knew that Konoha were sneaky bastards, but he hadn't appreciated how sneaky they really were. Was all of it part of their larger scheme to get the tailed beasts? He knew how powerful the Hachibi was. He could only imagine the horror of it being unleashed alongside 8 other such beasts. The Leaf now had 8 of the tailed beasts. They had been successful in every major objective in the war. In a moment of clarity, the Kaiten specialist realized just how dire the situation now was. The leader of Tetsu no Kuni was also starting to become convinced. He controlled his features and probed further. "If we did agree to aid you, what are you expecting? We would be happy with whatever you can lend us, however our hope would be full support and a military alliance. With your troops being fresh and our numerical superiority, we can turn the course of this war." Mifune looked at Archoi and asked for a detailed retelling of the ambush he survived. Archoi made sure to leave no detail out. Mabui had coached him to tell the truth, but to be as specific as possible. There were 3 pieces of evidence that linked Konoha to the attack: the use of Kage Bunshin, the kunai scroll, and the use of Kaiten. While each technique or tool was replicable, the fact that all 3 were present pointed towards a Konoha kill team. Mabui watched Mifune carefully, hoping to see a hint of what he was thinking. Mifune sat back and looked deep in thought. When he finally spoke, his voice betrayed curiosity. "You are persuasive, Mabui-san, however there is one question I cannot help but ponder. If Konoha is so calculating and effective with the deception, why was their attack on Archoi so inept? Surely if they displayed the ability to manipulate the former Reikage and Chushikage, they would realize such an attack would be counterproductive with their relations with us." Mabui stood there in stunned silence. She had been by the Reikage's side for many years and understood international politics. If Konoha were the masters of deception that they seemed to be, what was the attack on Archoi all about? An epiphany struck her and she struggled to control her features. The Reikage didn't like Archoi. Archoi was a terrible choice for a diplomat. Konoha wasn't stupid. Archoi was partially crippled, though he was clearly still powerful. But being a cripple would make him more sympathetic as a victim of an assassination attempt. Her mind raced as she now understood what had happened. Tezuka Yotsuki had planned for Archoi to be assassinated in Tetsu no Kuni. 2 birds with 1 stone, that snake. Mabui couldn't reveal her thoughts. While the tactic was disgusting, underhanded and repulsive to her, she was still loyal to her village. She still believed Konoha was a dangerous threat. And so she schooled her features and responded to the general's question. "I can't answer that, Mifune Dono. It could be their agents overestimated the consequences of Archoi's lost arm. Or perhaps they suffered too many losses amongst their Anbu and have less capable assassins on hand." She allowed a pregnant pause before continuing. "Or perhaps being the master manipulators there, they deliberately botched this attack in order to manipulate you. They would also know your keen wisdom and would have known you would find their ineptness in the attack as incongruous with the normal activity, causing you to doubt the facts before you." Okisuke wore a grimace on his face as he spat out, "Shinobi. Their treachery and deceits are as deep as the sea. Mifune had much to think about. The idea that Konoha would fail in an assassination just to muddy the waters was disconcerting. He longed for the days of a simple conflict where the enemy was clearly your enemy. I will consider your words and hear from the imprisoned Konoha shinobi. We will discuss this on the morrow. Mabui bowed deeply. Thank you for your time, Taisho. Break. Fuyu had gone through hundreds of potential kinjutsu and already had several promising techniques. The costs of them were high, but in the end it would be worth it. The Kinkaku force would have the power to take down the S-class monsters Konoha had produced. A few in particular were ones she saw as promising. One was a kinjutsu that was similar to what the former Reikage had done with Reiten no Yoroi, lightning release armor. It worked on the same principles, however the damage done to the nerve endings was permanent. It was called Reiten, Denku Supido, lightning release, lightning speed. The damage to the nerves was incredible, and if held longer than 30 seconds would lead to death. Even a few seconds would leave the shinobi unable to operate effectively. However, the speed it granted was on a similar level to the Reiten no Yoroi, lightning release armor, which would allow many shinobi to get a killing blow in within a moment of activating it. Even the Hokage had struggled with keeping up with the Reikage. The next kinjutsu was also promising if very distasteful. It allowed chakra to be consumed and stored as kinetic energy. The advance lay in the fact that one didn't need to consume their own chakra, they could consume it from another individual. Unlike a normal chakra kyuinjutsu, chakra absorption techniques, the chakra absorbed was lost permanently. It was foolish to do it with shinobi of the same village because you gained a temporary kinetic power in exchange for a permanent loss of your comrade's chakra. It was generally inefficient and was labeled as kinjutsu since high-ranking shinobi could use it to garner more power for the released energy by taking advantage of low-ranking shinobi. If its use became widespread, the ninja ranks could be decimated. Reading the history of its use showed the potential power. One shinobi had drained 30 ninja of all of their chakra. It had of course killed them. That ruthless shinobi had unleashed all of the energy in a single blow that had liquefied his opponent's body and shattered his own arm to pieces. Kumo had the advantage of numbers, but those numbers would be scythed down by the massive area jutsu of Konoha's elite. If her Kinkaku force could drain chakra from the fodder who would die anyway, well, why not? Wouldn't any Kumo shinobi die for the glory of their village? Needless to say, it would have to be kept secret, but it was one of the avenues that her Kinkaku force would take. By any means necessary she would succeed in her mission. They would hunt the likes of the Sannin and Sharingan no Kakashi. Many would die to give them the opportunity. She would ensure their sacrifice was not in vain. That will be it for this video. If you want more, comment down below, like, subscribe. And see you guys later.